Okay. Well, again, I want to welcome you all here, and this is going to be the first of 8 sessions. And I want to start off with a story about a family that I dealt with. A mother came in, she had a 12-year-old, which is a good age for coming in to see a counselor, and she had several things she wanted to resolve. And one of them was that her son was very absent-minded and was constantly forgetting his lunch. He'd go off to school, leave his lunch at home. See somebody nodding over here. And so she said she didn't like that. She wished he wouldn't do it. And so I said, well, okay, well, what's the problem? She said, well, in the morning he gets busy, he's absent-minded, he wanders off to school, there's the lunch sitting there on the counter. He gets to school, remembers he doesn't have it, goes by the office, says, call my mom, tell her I forgot my lunch, and so they do, and she brings it down. And I said, all right, so what's the problem? She says, oh, I don't want to take the lunch. And I said, don't. It didn't seem like a difficult question. I thought, gee, if that's what she's paying me for, this is going to be an easy session. So she said, well, the problem is, if I don't take his lunch, he goes without lunch. And I said, yes, he does. And she said, well, but doesn't that make me a bad mom? And I said, well, why? See, this is that problem so many parents get into with discipline, is they feel guilty about some of the things they do that are good for the child in terms of teaching them to take care of themselves, but they're not sure that, well, maybe I'm not a good mom or a dad when I do this. So I talked to her a little bit. I said, no, you're not being a bad mom. I said, besides, it doesn't have anything to do with being a mom. It has to do with being a parent. You're a mom when you fixed it for him. You're a parent when you tell him, if you go without it, you go without it. And so I talked this through with her a little bit, and I said, all right, how about this? Tomorrow, because she wanted to quit. I said, tomorrow, don't say a word to him. Don't say, because she was thinking of going home and telling him she wasn't going to take it anymore. I said, don't tell him. Don't tell him. Let the shock value help teach the lesson. He said, when he goes without it, or if he goes without it, when we went through a scenario, he gets to school, and this is exactly what happened. The next day he left without it. He got to school, he went to the office, he said, call my mom, tell her I forgot my lunch. They called his mom. She said, tell him we'll have dinner early. And she hung up the phone. You know, what's the secretary going to do? Call her back? No way. She said, that's a different one. And she hung up. So he came in at noontime and he said, where's my lunch? And they said, it isn't here. She said, well, didn't you call my mom? And he said, oh, yes, she said to tell you you'll have dinner early. And he's looking at him like, you got the wrong house. That's not my mom. She'd be down here with the lunch. And then the next thing I told her was, don't answer the phone during his lunch hour, because I knew what would happen. And it rang 3 separate times. He's trying to get mom on the phone, because if he could get mom on, if I can just get her on the phone and she can hear my voice, Mother, I'm dying. I won't make it through 5th period without my lunch. She'd have run it down. I knew I didn't have enough, she wasn't ready to deal with that. She'd have given in. I hadn't had enough time with her yet. So I said, don't pick up the phone. So she didn't. That afternoon, about 3 o'clock, the front door comes open. And here's her son, Mother! And she says, yes, son. He says, I didn't get my lunch today. She said, I know. He said, Mom, he said, they told me that you said we'd have dinner early. She says, yes, and we will. And he's looking at her like, go out and check the address. Maybe it's the wrong house. And he says, Mom, I didn't have any lunch today. You know how that felt? She says, well, I hope so, son. I may know. But what's important is, do you know how it felt? Because you see, there is a direct connection between diet and memory. And there was. There was. The next day, you know what? He remembered the lunch. And so she came back the next week, and I said, how are things going? She says, he's been taking his lunch every day. And I said, well, good, we got that one solved. She said, well, what if he leaves it at home? And I thought, wait a minute, we just gone through this. And I said, if he leaves it at home, it stays at home. She says, yeah, but he's been doing so well. See, here's that problem. He's been doing so well. shouldn't I take it to him? I mean, after all, he only forgot it that day. I said, if you do that, then he'll forget it the next day. You'll be right where you started. I said, if you're going to turn the job over to him, if you're going to make him responsible for the lunch, then leave the job with him and make him responsible for it. Don't take the lunch. Sure enough, about a week later, he did forget it. But here's what's interesting, because she never said anything to him. He forgot the lunch. He did not call home. When he got home, he didn't say anything about it. But the next day, he put it right by the front door so that he had to step over it to get out. Now, this first session, we're going to be talking about control, but I wanted to give you an idea of how the elements of a system work, because you've got to have all of them. You can't have 2 out of 3. You can't have 5 out of 6. There are 3 things you have to do. Anybody has to do. If you're going to have a disciplined system, I don't care if it's at home, I don't care if it's on the job, I don't care if it's in the military, it doesn't matter where it is. 3 things make a system work. One is you've got to have rules, and you've got to have some kind of limits. You know, we all come to work, and we kind of like it if you made it by 7:30, 8 o'clock, whatever. There are consequences, and that is you can go look for another job if you don't make it. But the real part of it is, how consistent are we? And you see, the level of our consistency will determine whether people pay any attention to us or not. So that's half the system. The other half is what it will accomplish. And this is what many parents don't really realize. And that is that, just like this mother, when she stopped taking the lunch and said, it's your responsibility, and she could do that because it became his responsibility. If she stopped being responsible for it, he had to be responsible. So she said, I'm not going to take the lunch anymore. He had to take the lunch. He had to get responsible. It's now my problem. I have to solve it. And I have to be disciplined enough to remember to get it there. And then when the day he forgot, what did he do? He got to thinking and problem solving. He said, if I don't want to go hungry again, I had better remember to take my lunch. And if I can't remember, remembering is my problem, not my mom's. She isn't making it her problem anymore. It's my problem. So thinking and problem solving is my problem. I got to figure out how to make sure I don't go hungry. That's what this is all about. We're going to be talking about this for all 8 sessions. We're going to be talking about each segment of it and how you work with that segment, but they've all got to be there each time. Well, I shouldn't say they've all got to be there. If these are all here, then you'll be working on something over here, if you're doing this right. Our basic issue is control, because you see, control is all about the power struggle that kids have to get control. The one thing I can guarantee you every child wants is the same thing that you want. We want as much control of our life as we can possibly get. And so my system, which I called Raising Adults, the idea was you start out with a child who is not responsible. Think about it, a tiny baby. How responsible? Not. How self-disciplined? Nothing. Thinking and problem solving for themselves? Ha! Quit kidding. But if you're going to be an adult, you have to learn all these things. They have to go from something you don't do to something you do. Which means that parents who start out doing all of these things for their kids have to learn not to do these things, so the child will learn that I have to do them. It's a matter of turning over control without losing control. You've got to do these things, and it is part of teaching. So that's why I said raising adults. The idea was, I had 5, by the way. They're all grown now. I don't have any children anymore, and I'm not a parent anymore. I'm still a dad. I'm a dad to 3 sons and 2 daughters. I'll always be dad, and they will always be my sons and daughters. But they are no longer my children, and because I no longer have any children, I am no longer a parent. I make a very sharp distinction in parenting about what it is to be a parent and what it is to be a mom or a dad. And discipline has to do with what a parent does. A parent educates whoever is put in their charge and teaches them how to become a responsible adult. Sometimes a parent is not mom or dad. Sometimes it's a teacher. Sometimes it's a relative. It can be a lot of people. A lot of people do the training. So the idea of a parent who teaches was what I had basically in mind. And the idea was, what do I want when I get finished? If you start out on a project, you really need to know, what is it I want when I'm finished? If you're going to bake a cake, you don't get out the celery and the broccoli. And, well, if you do, please don't invite me over. By knowing what you want when you get finished, you know what has to go into it in the beginning. If you're going to make a chair, you want to know what the result is going to look like, so that when you start out, you know what to do to make it turn out that way. Well, the same thing is true here. And I wanted my kids to become adults. I did not want them to grow up to be big children. So my idea was, I want to raise you to be adults. This is what I expect. These were the 3 characteristics that I said that, as far as I know, society will demand these of you even if I don't. Now, whether I want you to be president, or I want you to be happy, or I want you to be successful, or any of those things, society doesn't care. They don't care about that. But they do want me to teach you these things. So this is why I call these the characteristics of an adult. It's not the only characteristics, but it's the characteristics that people agree on. This is what we expect you to turn out, so we don't have to take on your problem when they're 25. Now, because of that, what did I do? I said to my kids, real simple, door one. Door one is to act as an adult. Door one says, if you will act as an adult, I will treat you as an adult, and I will let you control your consequences. Because isn't that the deal we get from life? If we will be responsible and self-disciplined and do our own thinking, which means we can be independent, then society says, well, pretty much we'll let you control what happens to you. But the other part of it was, if you act as a child and you don't do these things, if you're not responsible and you're not self-disciplined and you don't think for yourself, then I will control your consequences, because that's what you do with a small child. You don't expect them to do this, but you control what's going to happen. Anybody ever seen a 2-year-old running out in the street? You say, well, you know, what the heck, let them go. They'll learn. And if they don't, they can serve as a good example for their brothers and sisters or the rest of the kids in the neighborhood. You say, no, that isn't the way it works. Okay? What do? You go out and you get them. You control the consequences. Now, this is not, see, sometimes we act like children, and there's nothing bad about it. It's just that that's the way we're acting now. And you don't need to worry about, are you doing this deliberately or because you just don't know how to do any better yet? What does it matter? It's the same thing when the Mack truck hits them. So what we do is we take them out of the street and maybe go put them in the backyard and close the gate and maybe even lock it if they're real good at getting out of the backyard. We control the consequences. When the child stops running into the street and is old enough to understand that I don't do that anymore, we don't need to put them in the backyard anymore. They can control their consequences. Mommy, I want to play in the front yard. Fine. That's okay now. So it's not something really difficult to understand, but it does require that we realize how it works together. So act as an adult, I'll treat you as an adult, you control your consequences. Act as a child, I'll treat you as a child, I'll control your consequences. And you probably won't like the way I do it. My kids always called me weird dad. You know, weird stuff that I come up. You know, nothing bad, just weird. And so I said, as long as you don't want me in your life, then you take charge of it and I'll stay out, because I was ready to retire. Anytime. I'm ready. Now, the one thing that I told my kids they couldn't have is, you cannot have door number 3. You can have door 1, you can have door 2, you can't have door 3. What's door 3? Door 3 is, I don't want any consequences. I want to act like a child. I want to be irresponsible. I want to be undisciplined. I don't want to think things through effectively, just whatever I decide. Oh, I want to be in control. See, they're back to control. Yeah, I want to do it my way, but I don't want to be responsible for it. When was the last time you saw somebody who said, I don't want to be responsible for what I do? Somebody else should be to blame. Somebody else should be responsible. Somebody else should solve the problem. I was recently reading about somebody who bought a hot cup of coffee, spilled it in their own lap, and sued a company and won over $3 million settlement for spilling coffee in their own lap. Now, I'm sorry, that does not compute with this. On that basis, I don't need to do this seminar. I just need to go buy a cup of coffee, spill it in my lap, and retire. It doesn't make any sense. So I said, there is no door 3. What do we got here? Let's put it up here right. No door 3. If you're going to act as a child or an adult, there are going to be consequences. You can decide which consequences, whether they're the ones you control or the ones I control, but in either case there's going to be consequences. Because as a matter of fact, in the adult world, what do we all know? There's a consequence to everything. Life is not without consequences. By the way, if you'll notice, I use consequences. I do not use words like punishment or reward, because that's in the eye of the beholder. And I had a situation when I first got licensed. I was working, no, I'm sorry, I wasn't even licensed. I was doing my internship. I was working at a grammar school as the on-site counselor. It was a special program they had where they put a counselor in every one of these schools. And we had one kid who was a nice little guy. He was 5th grader. He was the nicest kid, but he had a real problem in that he was probably ADHD today. In those days, they just said he was just out of control. And he was always busy and getting into stuff in class, and it wasn't a really super bright child, and that was probably the problem. He couldn't stay focused on what was going on. And so, you know what they do? For discipline, and it was mostly, I think, to get him out of the classroom, they sent him outside to pick up papers on the playground, and their playground was all grass. This is an interesting school. It was an underground school. And you came up and out, and it was all grass, and then there was the top of the school was the basketball courts and that sort of thing. Well, they'd send him out to pick up paper. So they said, well, here's one of the kids you can start working with. So I brought him in, and I forget what his name was, Johnny or whatever, and I said, what's the deal? Oh, I don't know. I said, well, tell me this. I was trying to, probe for a little something here. I said, what do you like best about school? What's the thing you like more than anything else? You know what his answer was? Picking up papers on the playground. This was really going to work. Okay, kid, you either behave or we're going to make you pick up papers. Oh, don't throw me into the briar patch. So I don't use punishment and reward because you don't know. How many of you here have ever seen a small child that when you spanked them, all they did was grin? You ever seen one of those? Doesn't matter. Bang, bang, bang. And they just, and off they go. A clue for you, if you got one like that, put them in their room, because I can guarantee they can't stand isolation. See, the reason they don't mind the spanking is it's more attention. I got some more attention. So to say punishment and reward means that we have to figure out what that is. And there's a problem with that because it has to be in the eye of the beholder. So I just talk about it as consequences. You look at the child's behavior, and you can tell whether the consequence is a punishment or a reward to them. We're going to get into that a little bit in communication about why arguments and the other 7 sins of communication don't work. But the problem is that if they see it as a reward and you think it's a punishment, you're not going to get any place, or if they think it's neutral. And if they continue to do whatever they're doing, as long as you're being consistent, then guaranteed something here about the consequence needs to be changed, because it just doesn't have any effect with them. So I only use the word consequence, and it can be whatever the person believes it to be. And then you judge their behavior to find out what goes on. Because see, in the adult world, nobody really stops, in most cases, to think what your consequences are. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to think what your consequences are. That's what we mean when we tell you, why don't you ever think? What do we mean? Think. I do think. I think all the time. I think. We mean, why don't you think about the consequences? So, act as an adult, you control your consequences. Act as a child, I'll control your consequences. I don't care which, but you cannot act as a child and not have any consequences. Because I'm not going to let that happen, because I want you to understand that in life there are always consequences. And you might as well learn it now, because the sooner you learn it, the sooner you're going to start thinking about how to make sure they're the ones you want. That's all I want you to do. I want you to be in control of your life to whatever degree it is possible. Okay, now let me give you a couple of examples, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from examples, and that's all they are. They are an illustration. It's not go home and do this. I always have to caution people. I'm not saying this is the way to do it. I don't think anybody has the answer to how you should do it in terms of exactly what you should do. You are the on-site authority for that. The parent is the on-site authority for that. They're the one who knows that child best, and they're the one who can see what works and what doesn't work. So in terms of what rules and limits they should have, that's their value system, not mine. I shouldn't tell them what consequences to use. I can give them some ideas, but you pick the one that works with you. I want the parent to understand that this is something they're perfectly capable of doing. They already know how. Where most of them have the trouble is right down here, but we'll get into that. So, in order to get the kind of control that we want, we just tell the child, okay, you have got to pay attention to me. And I'm not going to spend my time trying to control you anymore. I'm going to control the environment. Not the child, the environment. And let the environment control the child. How many of you ever seen a small child who's running around, getting into trouble, and you need a rest, and you take him and you put him in a playpen? What have you done? You've given an environment and said, do all you want in there. But that's the way I control you. If I remember watching in church, a couple behind me, and this kid was kicking and twisting and turning and everything. And there was no way they were going to control that child. But as long as they stayed in church, there wasn't much else they could do. So what did Dad do? Bing. He got up, went out, took him outside, set him down, let him play. Now, he didn't let him go out and do anything that he didn't want him to do, but he quit trying to control the child and just started to control the environment around the child. We're going to do that. I'm talking about a case of a mother with about a 15 or 16-year-old daughter. And every morning she took her to school, mostly because it was convenient. School was about a mile, mile and a half away. The daughter had to walk if Mom didn't drive her. But the problem was Mom had to be to work at 8, and the daughter didn't have to be to class until 8:15. So guess what happened every morning? It was, hurry up and get ready. You're making me late. Get dressed. You haven't got your hair combed yet. Hurry up and eat. And she came in about this and said, what am I going to do? I cannot get her to get ready on time. And she said, and then I end up late. I mean, they expected it at work and they understood, but, you know, she says, this is getting old. So I said, what goes on? And she told me, it's this nag, 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 nag all morning. I said, I don't want you to say a word. We'll solve one thing right now. See, communication doesn't work. It really doesn't, folks. Action works. The talk that you do is just to make you feel good, but it doesn't work. You talk all day and you won't get any place. So I said, tomorrow you don't say a word to her. You go home tonight. Don't bother to say it tomorrow, because I want you to be silent in the morning. I don't want you to even be tempted to speak to her other than hello. He said, you tell her tonight, tomorrow I am leaving sharply at 7:45. And don't say anything else. Don't threaten her with, and if you're not ready, I said, don't get into that. Then all she's going to say is, well, let's see, how can I outfox you on this one? Because that's what they'll do. That's why I didn't want that mother to warn her son she wasn't going to take the lunch. So I said, don't say a word to her. And that morning when she's running late, you know, just bites your lip. And when it's 20 minutes of 8, don't say, you've only got 5 minutes left. You know, just cool it. I said, but at 7:45 on the dot, pick up your purse and go out the door. And I said, and don't run to the car and jump in and start up and back out there as quick as you can. Just walk to the car the way you normally would, get in, and go. Well, she did. And as she was starting the car and backing out, the daughter came charging out the door with her shoes in her hand, running for the car. So she stopped and let her in. I said, you know, if she makes it there before you're gone, let her get in. If she has to run half a block to catch you at the corner and you're still at the corner, let her in. This isn't some kind of a big ha, 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 ha. This is just, I'm leaving at 7:45. You decide what you're going to do. Okay? But there is going to be a consequence. It's not this no consequence anymore. There is going to be a consequence. You either ride with me or you don't. I don't care which. I said, don't say a word to her. So she got in the car, and off she went. The next morning, she was still running a little bit behind because, again, Mom left right at 7:45. She came in to see me the next week, and I said, how's it going? She says, she's ready on time every day now. And that's simple. And I said, are you saying anything? And you know, this was a mom who really hated not to say something. She was saying no. But she really wanted to. She felt that all that nagging was really helping. It's like the parent that thought the difference between their child getting F's and D's was how much they nagged them. I had a case like this, I'm not kidding. And I finally got him to stop the nagging, and the child's grades went up to B's. That doesn't always happen, but I had a pretty good hunch that a big part of this was this kid was just so tired of all of this. Will you shut up? So, we'll get into communication more. Now, what are a few limits that you can put on things that you can use in control? Well, the earliest one that any parent probably is aware of is as soon as. Remember that one? Can I go out and play? As soon as you've had breakfast. Can I do this? As soon as. Can I watch television? As soon as you pick up your toys. As soon as. Well, that doesn't change. As soon as is something, it is a limit that you can use all the time they're at home. You got a 14-year-old and you say, oh, by the way, from now on, I want you to clean up your room before dinner. And that's all you say. Forget the lecture. You didn't listen to them when your parents gave them to you. Your kids don't either. If you've noticed, if you look, you remember what you did when your parents lectured you? The eyes glazed over, the mind departed, they were talking to an empty shell. It doesn't work. Don't say any more than, from now on, clean up your room before dinner. You say, well, how are they going to do that if I don't explain it to them? I said, there's a new principle. It's called do discipline. You say, if you tell them what to do and you enforce it, they will do it. So anyway, I said, just don't say anything except clean up your room before dinner. Now, they will either do it, in which case is the problem solved, yeah, or they won't, in which case now it's training time. See, that's the whole idea of this is, now we're going to teach them, but I know how I'm going to do it. So here they come. They didn't take responsibility for cleaning up their room, and they certainly weren't disciplined about it because they didn't take responsibility for it. And I don't come up with, why didn't you clean up your room? You don't care. Did you ever, how many times have you asked those ridiculous questions? Why didn't you do your homework? I don't want to do my homework. Oh, okay. I mean, that isn't the answer you would give. Eh? You know when your parents did it to you, it was, you are in trouble and this is the way I let you know. So don't ask them why they didn't clean the room up. All you do, and don't at about 5 o'clock say, we're having dinner in a half hour. Don't do it. Say nothing. When dinner's on the table, say, dinner time. Oh, great. Boy, am I hungry. Oh, by the way, did you clean up your room? Oh, no, I what? Forgot. Remember that one? I use that one all the time. You forgot? Oh, you forgot. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. You can go do it now. But I'm hungry now. That's okay. You'll still be hungry after you clean up your room. Well, why can't I eat first and then clean up my room? Because I said, clean up your room by dinner time. It's now dinner time. Go clean up your room. Well, then I just won't eat. Good. That'll give you more time to clean up your room. Well, if I don't eat, why do I have to clean up my room if I'm not going to eat? I didn't say clean up your room in order to eat dinner. I said clean up your room by dinner time. It's now by dinner time. It's as soon as. It is a time. Go clean up your room. Whether you eat or not, I don't care. I'm only telling you, you are not going to eat until after the room is cleaned. That is the consequence of not having done it sooner. So if you wanted to be in control of your consequences, you needed to quit watching TV about an hour ago and go and clean up your room. But you didn't. So guess what? I control the consequences. Go clean up your room. When you're finished, you can eat. That's all there is to it. But we get rid of you can get rid of 80% of the effort that goes into discipline just by stopping all the talk. It doesn't work anyway. So, as soon as, what's this one? You can clean up your room by dinner time, and then I can enforce that. And pretty soon you'll have a child that knows, if I want to eat with the rest of the family, I better clean up my room. What do I have to do? I have to be responsible. I have to be disciplined enough to come in from playing or quit watching television or whatever it is I'm doing, watching grass grow, and I've got to come in and do it. And maybe I have a little problem solving here because there are other things that I want to accomplish between the time I get home from school and dinner time. Well, that's your job to accomplish them because I made you responsible for it. And is it unreasonable to say get your room cleaned up by dinner time? No. There's nothing unreasonable. By the way, one of the things that was very important to me was to structure what I teach with the idea that you never have to get anywhere close to being abusive. And the way you do it is you become consistent instead, so the child knows that whatever you say, and that's what you're going to do, then you don't have to get abusive. And then if you follow through on it each time, say, yep, I did it again. And that's it. So it's not difficult to do. I'm not saying it's simple. Let's put it that way. It is simple. It is not necessarily easy because it means changing some of our habits. But that's really all it is. Parents that have bad discipline habits just need to change habits. And the way you decide what do I need to change is what's going on with my child that I don't like, because guaranteed whatever's going on that I don't like, something about the way I'm dealing with them is continuing to get this behavior. So if I change what I'm doing to get a change in this behavior, then I just keep changing until I get the behavior I want. Oh, that works. Every parent has to change their consequences from time to time. You don't do the same thing with a 12-year-old that you do with a 2-year-old. It's just a matter of saying, well, what will work with my 12-year-old, not anybody else's, my 12-year-old. That's why I say parents are the expert on what to do. But how to do it? No, this is how to do it. And this is the big how. Okay. Let me give you a couple other ways, because we're talking here about control. And what I say again is turning over control without losing control. When I turned over control when that mother turned over control of the lunch, did she lose control? Not one bit. When you say, clean your room before dinner, do you lose control? No. You actually give the child more control. You can do this whenever you want. It's no more of me, okay, hey you, get in there and clean that room now. No, it's clean it whenever you want. But have it done by dinner time. That's the way most of us are allowed to run our lives. It's how adults deal with other adults. Have the report in by Friday at the end of the workday. That's it. Okay? And then you don't come around and say, have you got that report? Have you been working on that report? I noticed you weren't working on that report today. Shut up. You want the report done? It'll be done. I'm responsible, I'm self-disciplined, and I know how to get it done and on your desk by Friday. It's Tuesday afternoon, butt out. My room's supposed to be cleaned by dinner time. It's 2 o'clock, butt out. Yeah, but you're watching television. Yeah, I am. Well, you should be cleaning your room. Wait a minute, I thought it was my responsibility. Yeah, it is. Well, if it's my responsibility, let me decide when I should be doing it. And if I don't do it, then I'll go without dinner until I do it. And this is where parents get off track, is that they keep taking back responsibility. And by the way, we'll get into that too. Parents talk about giving responsibility. You can't give responsibility to anybody. You can give authority to them. You can't give responsibility. Okay, one other. Let's take something with a small child. You've got a couple of 4- and 5-year-olds squabbling, and you want to turn over control without losing control. And see, the idea is, how do I get them to practice these? There's a lot of discipline that'll get somebody to be obedient, but I want them to practice this. And if possible, I want to practice thinking and problem solving in an effective manner and let them know it's up to you to do it, not up to me to do it for you. So, we got 2 kids, 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 7-year-old, whatever, and they're fighting over a toy, let's say, or who gets to ride the tricycle or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. Let's say it's a toy. And they're squabbling, and you don't want them to squabble. You say, okay, you have got, well, I won't ask you this because we can't get the answers back from you, but in a lot of cases, what parents will do, they'll come in and take the toy away. That solves it. Take the toy, they can't fight over it, there. But the problem is, you've solved the problem for them, but you've done the thinking. I want them to do the thinking. I would come in and say, you've got 2 minutes to figure out how to share that toy. And then I'd leave. But I'd check in 2 minutes, I'd come back. If they've figured out how to share it, they've done what I asked, that's what I asked, they're doing it, leave them alone. You control the consequences. If you do what I ask, you control the consequences. But let's say they're still squabbling about it. Okay, I'd take it away. And go put it up someplace. Now, how long do you keep it? See, some parents, it's going to be away for a week. That ought to teach them. Well, no, because by the time the week's up, they've even forgotten about the fact that you took it in the first place. No, what I would do is, particularly with smaller kids, whose attention span is pretty short, I would come back in a little while if I remembered it, and if I didn't, no big deal, but you know, if I'm going to try and teach this, I come back and say, do you 2 want that toy back? What are they going to say? 9 times out of 10, yeah! Because usually what they were fighting over is what they like best. Yeah, we want it back. You say, okay, can you play with it without fighting about it, squabbly? What are they going to say? No, we can't, but give it to us anyway? No, they're going to say yes. I mean, you've got a slam dunk for the answer. Sure, we will. Oh, yeah. That's like, remember when they brought home the cat and said, can we keep it? We'll take care of it. You remember how long that lasted? You know, the next morning, who was feeding it? You were. So anyway, you say, will you play with it nicely? Yes, we will. Okay. You bring it back and give it to them. Now, what have they got to do? See, you got a commitment from them. They said, they didn't realize it, but they said, yes, we'll be responsible and we'll be self-disciplined and we will figure out how to play with this nicely. Fine. So they're getting some practice. If it works, you've made some progress. A little bit, but you've made some progress. If it doesn't, you come back through and they're squabbling and you say, up. Told you to not to squabble. Now you could either give them, you say you got 2 minutes again to do that, or you could take the toy back, put it away. Maybe later that day you think about it and you say, you want the toy back? Yeah, and go through the same routine. But now what you're doing is you're getting them to think, oh, we're supposed to figure out how to have the toy and play with it nicely. So we have control of the toy, we have control of the consequences if we will act responsibly. That's it. And if we don't, guess what? Mom will control the consequences, and the toy's gone. Poof, or Dad will, whoever happens to be there. Zingo, the toy's gone. And then we get it back and we get to practice again. Okay. How about some questions now? Anybody has a question if you'd like? I'm going to have to ask you to come on up, and I know some people are kind of shy about that, but if you could, because otherwise we won't. Yes?
After these experiences, how do you follow them up with a discussion, with some verbal?
Okay, that's a good question. How do you follow it up after you've I would recommend. Now, I'm not saying don't talk to your kids, but what I would recommend is if you really want to teach the lesson, just keep doing the same thing. You don't need to explain it to them. And here's why. You say, well, but don't I want them to understand? We spend too much time worrying about them understanding. If you keep taking the toy away, sooner or later they're going to figure it out. Anybody here ever trained a dog how to stay off the couch? How many of you sat down with a dog and said, now, Rover, let me explain about the couch? I saw a cartoon once, and it was talking about how Rover sees what's going on. And it shows the dog sitting there, and this big cartoon balloon the conversation, and it goes something like this. Rover, blah, 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 Rover, blah, 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 Rover, blah, 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 Rover. Now, I don't know what's going on, but you take a newspaper and smack him with it every time he gets up on the couch, and what's going to happen? Sooner or later, Rover is going to figure out, I don't think I'm supposed to be on the couch. And if he doesn't figure, at least he figures out something bad happens when I get on that. Now, I'm not saying treat your kids, just smack them with a newspaper every time they do something wrong and figure they'll catch on. No, but in terms of explaining it to them, most cases, I wouldn't bother. They've learned the lesson. They've learned as much as they're going to learn then. See, one of the things, and this is a good point, too many times parents want to teach the entire lesson now. And so that means that not only do I teach the lesson in terms of what I do, but then I try to explain it all to them so they understand it so that it will never happen again. That doesn't even happen with us. So I would say, for the most part, let your discipline explain itself. For one thing, if you let your discipline explain itself, you'll think far more about what you do. Because you think, if this has got to teach it, and it doesn't depend on me saying something, then can I be sure that what I'm doing in the child's mind is relating to what's going on? For instance, if the dog was up on the couch this morning and you come home at 6 o'clock, you don't go in and smack him with a paper and say, there, that ought to teach you. What's going on here? Okay? Any other questions?
I have a difficult time not explaining to the child what the consequences will be, because it's almost like setting the child up for failure. And sometimes you hope that they fail so that they learn the lesson, but I just don't seem to agree with what you're saying at some length.
Okay, explain it to them?
Yes, like it is fair to explain to the child
what the
what the consequence will be before the child goes on to the next step, so that they do have a knowledge. I mean, I think it's more of a democratic way to explain the consequence.
I don't have any problem with that. However, let me give you one example again from adult life, and that is that we don't always know what the consequences are. A lot of it in life is in just knowing that there will be some, and not relying on somebody to tell us ahead of time and saying, well, you didn't tell me, so therefore I'm not accountable. So
that's correct, but we are adults, they are children, and somehow some children need to be told what the consequences will be.
yes,
And that's just my own personal belief.
I have no problem with it. Yeah, I'm saying I don't think it is absolutely necessary. I don't have any problem. This is one of those things that, when I say do it your own way, do it the way that makes sense to you. I'm just suggesting that there are certain things that are not absolutely necessary. But if a parent says, well, I always feel better if I explain it, I feel that it gives the child the best chance to deal with, that's okay. I'll give you two examples of this that happened with my kids. One was when they were very small, we had a playroom, large playroom, with all kinds of, that was where everything was, books, toys, everything, games, all of it, and the television. And when I would come home, oftentimes they had come home from school before I got there, of course, and instead of going to their room and getting rid of their jackets and book bags and shoes and whatever else, they'd dump them all over the floor, just kick them off there, because it was only about 10 steps to the playroom and it was about 30 steps to their room. And I thought, I want to get this picked up, but the problem was that over and over again, I was what I call henhouse discipline. If you ever know anything about raising chickens, they raise them in a chicken coop. And they just sit there and lay eggs. And they're all very quiet and placid. But if you take a baseball bat and you go out and you slam on the side of that chicken coop, why, all the chickens go, and they, and then the feathers fly all over the place. And then if you leave, why, they'll finally settle back down and they'll start laying eggs again. So the problem was that if I went in and said, get this room picked up? How many times do I have to tell you kids after all I do for you, and this is all the thanks I get for it? I don't know why, you know, all that stuff that we try to make them feel guilty. They don't buy it. But what they do is they grab something, right? A pair of shoes or something, and they run around while I'm saying all of this. And then as soon as Dad leaves, good, Dad leaves, and boom, back it goes, and they go back to doing what they're doing. I didn't get the room cleaned up, I got it rearranged. I didn't want it rearranged. It didn't look any better that way than it did before I came in and blew my top. So I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to walk in, and here's the thing about telling the consequences. I walked in, and they were all sitting there. A couple of the small ones were watching television. One was reading a book. One was playing a game. But I shut off the TV, which got everybody's attention. You know, the sound went off. Where's the sound? And I said, okay, kids, new rule. They said, oh, new rule. Dad's got a new rule. And I said, the new rule is this. From now on, when I come home, if there's anything in here that doesn't belong in here, then I'm going to turn off the TV. Now, the TV only stays off as long as it takes to clean up the room. You know, it isn't off for the rest of the night or anything. As soon as it's done, it's done. I said, I'm going to turn it off. And then that's the signal that everything stops in here. You stop reading, you stop playing a game, of course you can't watch the television, it's not on, right? Until the room is picked up. As soon as it's picked up, you can all go back to doing whatever you're doing. I said, do you understand that? Yeah, I wanted to get their commitment. Yes. And okay. Now, what do I do next? I walked out of the room. Why? Well, if they understood it, what would they do? Pick up their stuff. They'd pick up their stuff. So, my point was this, okay, you understand it? That's what's going to happen, and I told them the consequence, and I left. And immediately there was, whoom, and they were grabbing this stuff and running down the hall and throwing it into their rooms, and bam, and back out and turn on the television. And by the way, if they've been watching a program for 57.5 minutes, it takes about 30 seconds to get that room cleaned up. But the whole idea was, you can go ahead, the whole idea was that with the consequence, I told them, because to just come in and shut off the TV, well, what's Dad doing? Is he in a bad mood or what? Yeah, I wanted to connect up why I was turning it off and what they needed to do to turn it back on. So yes, I needed to clarify the consequence there. If I had a child who was, well, I don't know, leaving their toys out on the floor, I might not tell them the consequence. I might say, go in and pick them up. And if they didn't, I might go in and go put them in a box and just stash them away someplace and wait to see how long it took them to say, where are my toys? So I wouldn't necessarily tell them the consequence there, just because, hey, sometimes you just were supposed to do it and you didn't. Now you know what happens when you don't do it. Here are the toys back. Don't do it again. And in that, I'm still doing what you're talking about, is I want them to understand the connection. But sometimes I let them experience it, like the kid with the lunch. Because, you see, he was old enough that if she'd told him what she was going to do, and he was good at manipulating Mom, the danger was that he would take it for a while. I'll show you. And then one day leave it, figuring everything's calmed back down now, just to test Mom and see, and then she's back where she was, and she would still have to not take a lunch. So it wasn't going to change what happened, whether she warned him or not warned him. It was just a matter of when it was going to happen. And if you think about it, in most cases, that's what's going to happen. Now, there are certain things that you don't want to have happen. I didn't want any of my kids to not be to school on time, because my rule for that was, see, when they hit the first grade, I gave them each an alarm clock and said, from now on, you get yourself up whenever you want. But I turned over control without losing control, because I said, but you must be ready for school on time. And our kids left on a bus, so it was very clear that they were either ready on time or not. And they had to figure out to be sure that they gave themselves a couple of extra minutes in case that bus arrived 1 minute early. And that was the thing. And I told them ahead of time, the consequence is this. If you are not ready on time, then that night I will set your alarm clock and I will give you plenty of time to get up. I mean, plenty. You get somebody up at 4 o'clock, they can be ready at 7. It's easy. And that's what I That's what I intended to do. And I told them ahead of time, because as far as I was concerned, I didn't want to have to do that. I didn't want to have to get up at 4. But I let them know so that they understood this is what will happen, this is what's going to happen if you don't. Now, I raised 5. Can you imagine how many times that I got somebody up at 4 o'clock, set an alarm clock for 4? Twice. See, because when you set an alarm clock for 1, 5 learn. Got them up? That was it. If you get them up a half hour early, you'll do it for years. Don't make it a half hour. Make it enough that they really don't want it to happen again. Weird Dad will get you up at 4 o'clock. You don't want to be late. See? It's that little extra motivation. Yeah, I think I'm a motivational parent. I'm just here to inspire you to be ready on time. And if you're ready on time, you control the consequence. If you're not, I do. Act as an adult, I'll treat you as an adult. Act as a child, I'll treat you as a child. No door 3. Not going to say, okay, well, next time. See, you do that, what happens here? Consistency just went down the tubes, folks. And that's what they pay attention to. You think, well, I taught them a lesson. No, what you taught, yeah, you taught them a lesson, not the one you think. You taught them, I can probably get away with it again. So, okay, that concludes our first session.